Hey, it's Dan from the Runaways, talking about Arakni Marionette. This is a hero and deck that I absolutely love playing, feel is extremely powerful, and highly recommend you checking out. I've been playing Arakni Marionette on and off since the release of the Hunted, even piloting their younger form in back-to-back drafts at the calling Memphis to a top 8 finish. Since then, I've been putting countless hours into this hero in Classic Constructed, exploring new playlines, and refining my different deck builds for upcoming tournaments. Most recently, finishing in the top 4 at the Battle Hardened in Kansas City. More recently than that, I've put together a very in-depth Metafy guide covering my take on Arakni Marionette on a very disruption-focused build. This guide includes everything you need to understand the build, talking through all the different card choices that went into it, the pitch-based strategy, the high-impact plays we're looking to pull off, detailed matchup game plans for all the meta-relevant decks, and of course included is the full deck list and sideboard guides. But what we're doing here today is giving you a bit of a preview into what is in that article. I'm going to break down the deck itself for you here, and then we'll also play a game of Flesh and Blood that hopefully highlights those kind of core concepts that I built the deck around. So moving into the deck itself, let's first break down Arakni Marionette. This is a Chaos Assassin hero. They have two pretty powerful hero abilities. The first one gives your attacks with stealth that are attacking a marked hero +1, and when it hits, this gets go again. This is extremely threatening on the on-hit of gaining go again, but then also the +1 making your stealth attacks extremely difficult to deal with. The second ability says if you end your turn with your opponent marked, you will transform into a random agent of chaos. These are quite interesting, and it's honestly very fun and interesting to have to plan around which random agent you may end up flipping into. The math is pretty simple on the types of effects you get. Obviously, if you want a specific one, it's a 1 in 6 chance, but you have a 50% chance to flip into an attack react ability that works on any assassin card. You have a 66% chance to flip into just an attack reaction. And then you have a 5 in 6 chance to flip into any ability that allows you to convert one of your cards into 3 damage, as long as you have a target for that reaction. And then you have Trapdoor, who's kind of the odd one out. As you can see here, there's 5 offensive abilities and then 1 defensive ability, which allows you to tutor a trap from your deck, which is extremely powerful, especially when you have the Mask of Deceit on the board, allowing you to get the value out of the free blocking card and then transform into something that presents offensive pressure. But in the end of the game, when you don't have that hat anymore or you're not being attacked, flipping into Trapdoor after your opponent blocked the whole hand is not a lot of fun. Not where you want to be. So now let's break down the build itself and kind of the concepts that went into landing on this deck list. There are 2 main concepts that I'm kind of building around and optimizing around here. One is I am building for power over consistency. I was finding towards the end of last meta and in early testing in this meta that converting blues in particular into swinging your Clave and your Graphene Chelicera is just not good enough. Obviously, there's plenty of turns where you want to be doing this, but having a high blue count and kind of forcing yourself into these plays is not where I want to be. So this also means I'm playing less dagger-specific attack reactions, and I'm playing some, I guess, lower consistency cards like Just a Nick that have huge upside when you need them to. So that's kind of the one concept, is I'm building for power at the cost of some consistency. This also looks like just playing a lower blue count in general, especially after the Bonds of Agony ban. Our blue base is fairly weak, so I am opting to play more yellows and much less blues. Currently I have 12 blues and 9 yellows in the list. The other core concept is we are building to be as disruptive as possible, and this kind of plays into our high-level game plan for each matchup, which we'll break down in just a second. But the goal here again is just to disrupt your opponent as much as possible, ask them as many questions as you can, and take advantage of any board blocking decisions that they make. So with Bonds of Agony gone, the only targeted disruption we have left is Persuasive Prognosis. We also have Surgical Extraction, but that card does not synergize with pretty much any other card in the deck besides Shred. So the focus here is Persuasive Prognosis is our way to look at our opponent's hand and choose the most impactful card to banish. Obviously, there's restrictions, and it's based on the color that is banished off the top of their deck. But having that selection is still a big deal in a lot of matchups. So we're optimized around making Prognosis a good card. Otherwise, our blue base is even weaker. Our disruptive threats are lacking. Like, we really only have Mark of the Black Widow otherwise. So that's kind of the core thing we're building around, is make Prognosis good. And I honestly feel without Justinic in your deck, Prognosis is just a bad card. Like, there'll be some spots where maybe you'll have enough attack reactions to make it hit, but like on the base, right, it comes in for 1. Any of your +3 reacts on your agents or like a Stains of the red back. Only pumps to 4, which is blocked by 1 defense reaction. Even with the +1 from the Mare ability, it's just not that hard to deal with. So I'm choosing to optimize around Justinic in the deck for the upside of Prognosis being a powerful blue instead of a 1 attack block 3 that you hope to never arsenal. And that's another key concept with playing cards like Justinic and Take Up the Mantle, is now I can very comfortably arsenal any of these blue 1 attack cards and just kind of wait until I find one of those and turn them into a very powerful effect. So with that in mind, let's talk about the kind of core game plan when you're playing this hero. This is kind of consistent across all matchups. Obviously, there's some more specific things for each matchup you want to keep in mind, but at a high level, I have 3 main steps for how to use this deck in particular. Step 1 is equip Graphene Chelicera as early as possible. This is just to ensure that you can have the most efficient turns possible. Having a 1-cost dagger is a huge deal. Any of those hands where you're drawing 4 reds, you just can't be pitching 2 reds to swing Hunter's Glaive. So if you draw a hand of all dagger pumps, being able to only pay 1 card to swing the Graphene Chelicera turns a horribly below rate turn into an on rate or just above rate turn, which kind of keeps you in the game because a lot of those pumps will block too. It also enables some of your most hyper efficient turns where you can swing Chelicera with Tunic and then play all the pumps around it for free. Step 2 is to find a mid-game turn. So this is in that like 20 to like 26, 27 health range. It can be higher, just harder to keep the pressure afterwards. But you want to find a turn in that mid-game area where you effectively skip your opponent's offensive turn through your disruption. This is usually in the form of 2 disruptive effects. Your most potent one is flipping into the Black Widow agent, playing a Kiss of Death, playing the Black Widow ability to the Kiss of Death, and then flicking it on a later chain link, effectively banishing 2 cards from the opponent's hand, forcing them to block because it's a bunch of damage. That's a great one. Another example is like a Leave No Witnesses, you activate Snaps, you play Codex and play Leave No Witnesses again. Things like that. You're trying to present 2 or more disruptive effects where you're getting your opponent to block some cards, they're losing your cards because your disruption's hitting, and you're basically forcing them to either have no cards or just like take a setup turn or just swing weapon. Once you achieve that in the mid game, this deck is extremely good at snowballing advantage through continuous damage and disruption pressure. And that's step 3 is once you achieve that turn skip, you just kind of make decisions that allow for consistent turns of presenting damage or disruption. And what I mean by that is like making sure you're cycling good arsenal targets like Kiss of Death or retrieve cards. Because once you're kind of like, you take that little bit of a health lead, and now they're below 20, and you have all of your cards, you're like one turn cycle away from any given Kiss of Death or Chalicer representing a lethal attack, and that's where they basically just run out of good blocking decisions, because if they don't overblock your first dagger, you might pump it by a bunch and they die. If they do overblock it, then you can just kind of sidestep and close the game that way. So 3 steps: equip Chalicer early, find a mid-game pivot through heavy disruption, and then snowball that advantage through presenting continuous and consistent damage and disruption. Now let's talk about why these concepts and this game plan is strong. Why is this powerful? Why is this what I'm trying to do? So the first thing is this game plan asks your opponent an absurd amount of questions. Every turn of the game, you should be presenting difficult decisions to your opponent. Arakni Marionette's hero ability alone is excellent at this. Again, the +1 being applied to stealth attacks make them infinitely harder to deal with because they come in for 4 instead of 3. The kind of issue here is that, let's say Mark of the Black Widow, for example, when this comes in for 3, your opponent can block it with any of their action cards that block for 3, and then if you react, they can react to cover that up. Where if this is coming in for 4, not a lot of decks have blocking cards for 4 other than their reactions, and choosing to only use your reaction on this leaves you vulnerable to an attack reaction pumping over the top. So your opponent has to find a way to cover 4 using usually equipment plus a card before you even have to commit reactions. Like if your opponent just blocks 3 on your Mark of the Black Widow for 4, you can simply pass because when this hits, you can go again and you can use your reaction on your next attack. So it's a lot harder to deal with. And then the threat of go again is basically giving every stealth attack in your deck an on-hit that your opponent has to think about. So it's kind of just baseline what we're starting with. And then what really emphasizes this game plan of ask your opponent a lot of questions is the mere density of disruption that we are playing in this list. So just going through the full 72, just going to kind of call out the disruption cards to highlight just how much there is. So Command and Conquer, we have Kiss of Death when we have like our most threatening agents, like the Black Widow agent, threatening to banish 2 cards from hand potentially. Leave no witnesses. 6 copies of Mark of the Black Widow. Another thing to highlight with Just the Nick is that now blue Mark of the Black Widow is the same rate as the red when you have Just the Nick to pair with it. Just adding more opportunities to make your disruption hit, and anytime your opponent's attempting to block a disruptive attack and you hit anyway, that's when you really hit the ceiling of impact for your disruption, because your opponent's lost multiple cards now, which typically shuts down their turn. Pain in the backside is pseudo disruption in that it is either getting blocks from your opponent, which makes it harder for them to cover up your follow-up disruptive attacks, or again, it makes the impact of those disruption attacks hitting even more so because they're down more than just 1 card, which decks can usually deal with not too bad. Alternatively, your opponent is not blocking this card. You're getting 4 value on a go again attack, which is good. But the key here is that you're marking your opponent, which is a key step to enabling a lot of your disruption, whether it's just giving you go again to present 2 disruptive attacks in the same turn, or for Mark of the Black Widow specifically, your opponent needs to be marked for the effect to be online. Continuing on, don't want to spend too much time here. We get to our blue base, where we have, again, Persuasive Prognosis as that additional disruptive tool. But then kind of the key for this list is we have 3 copies of Take Up the Mantle, which means every single one of our attacks that say stealth on them, and I should have 17 on the list, in the list if I'm not incorrect there, which means every single one of these is now threatening to be the most disruptive attack we have in our discard pile. So just having Take Up the Mantle exist in your deck means your opponent has to be considering this at all times, which again is a lot for them to have to deal with, and is what we want to be doing, is presenting those difficult questions for them to answer on defense. The other reasons I think this type of strategy is very strong: you have a lot of evasive damage and closing power. I mean, this is true of most Marionette builds, but it's important to highlight. Evasive damage, meaning it's hard for your opponent to know if the first attack you present on the turn is the only attack, if you have one attack you're going to follow up after that, or if you have 3 or 4. So because of this, they have to kind of, again, answer difficult questions of how many cards should I block here in case their hand is just 3 reactions and then they end their turn. Because your opponent doesn't want to be left with cards they can't use on offense, you'll sometimes get blocks on like your early dagger swings, which again leaves them open to getting even more disrupted by your disruption later in the turn. And then finally, this type of list in particular has a very strong ability to high roll your difficult matchups, because we're playing these like high ceiling cards like Just a Nick and Take the Mantle. Like, for example, what you can do there, let's say you're attacking with a Blue Reaper's Call and your opponent's marked. You can first play Just a Nick, getting the +5. You can then take up a mantle, swapping into something like Mark of the Black Widow, for example, which is now coming in for 4 because your opponent's marked. +5 from Just a Nick, so 9, and then 12 after the mantle. And that's off of attacking with the blue and 2 reactions. And your opponent's now banishing a card. So your ceiling's very high with this deck. You're playing a lot of very powerful 2-card synergies, meaning like any of your blue 1 powers plus Just a Nick, any of your stealth attacks plus Take of the Mantle, Tarantula Toxin plus Graphene Chalice or Kiss of Death, that kind of thing. So if you draw the cards in the right order, with this type of build that's built around being higher power, you will win the games when you draw the cards in the good order. Well, let's highlight some of the key cards. I'm going to call it 3 of them. Talk about why they're core to the deck. So you can't really talk about Arakni Marionette without talking about Kiss of Death. This is just got to be the best card in the deck. It synergizes with absolutely everything that you're doing, mostly because it has this text making it a dagger attack, meaning all of your dagger pumps work, all of your agent abilities work. When you're able to use flick knives, you're dealing 2 damage instead of 1. Your biggest disruption play is playing Kiss of Death, activating the Black Widow agent ability on it, giving it go again, and then flicking it on the next chain link to banish 2 cards from your opponent's hand. This card is just insane. It's probably the best arsenal target in the deck just because it allows you to convert your dagger pumps without having to pay for your daggers. Next, we'll talk about cards that are more unique to this list itself. I think Pain in the Backside is a big one to highlight. A lot of decks are playing this, at least in their sideboards. For me, this is like main deck in every matchup. I think this card is absolutely core if you're enacting a disruption-based game plan like I am. We already kind of highlighted it. Either you're getting blocks on it, which is effectively disrupting your opponent, or it's not being blocked and marking your opponent, enabling your disruption to be disruptive. I think this card's great. Because I'm mainboarding this card, I'm now able to use most of my sideboard slots as just tech cards for specific matchups. If you get the Metafy guide, you'll kind of see what that breakdown looks like, but my main board is like 52 or 54 cards or something like that. Yeah, Pain in the Backside's great. It's obviously very good against Gravy Bones, having go again attacks to clear allies like Swabby or Sawbones. Last cards I want to highlight are Just a Nick plus Take the Mantle. We've kind of talked about them in depth already, but they're very core to this deck, allowing you to recur your most disruptive effects and also ensure that you're connecting with them with that unexpected +5 on the Just a Nick. So let's talk about matchups a little bit. What are the good ones? What are the bad ones? So you can decide whether you should play Marionette at your local event. Good matchups are really anything on the slower side, especially anything that doesn't have defense reactions or prevention effects, or very few. You kind of get to fully dictate how the game plays out, and knowing when your flick knives will connect, knowing when your attack reactions will force your disruption through, make the games very easy on your side. So specific decks where I think you're extremely favored are Guardians, excluding Victor. Victor's not a bad matchup, it's just much more difficult than the others. Mechanologists, Warriors, Brutes, Kayo because of the Widow Veil equipment. Slippy. And then the decks we don't highlight in the bad category, I think, are all pretty good matchups, but they are more demanding on you to play optimally to realize your edges. Bad matchups are really just decks that are able to run a heavy amount of defense reactions and prevention effects. This currently includes the Earth heroes being Florian and Verdance. They're very well positioned and have the tools to make the game difficult for you. Still very winnable, but much more challenging. And then Gravy Bones is kind of just a low agency matchup. It's really dependent on the order the cards are drawn on both sides. All of your cards don't have text for the most part when they're not attacking the opposing hero, meaning if you attack allies. So you're kind of forced into a lot of play lines, and you kind of just hope you draw the cards in the good order, like we talked about earlier, and then you win those games. I don't really consider it a terrible matchup. It's just kind of, you can't control too much that goes on in that game. So reasons that I would recommend you taking a look at Arakni Marionette for your upcoming pro quests. This deck, again, is extremely powerful and very difficult to play against. You ask so many questions from your opponent the whole game, which is a great place to be, I think, at the pro quest level. It's a bit of an off-meta hero. Kind of always has been. It's been popular at times, but never really a top deck at tournaments. Now especially, I think we're in a meta where you won't see much Marionette. It's admittedly not the strongest meta for the hero, but I think that also adds some appeal because people won't be practiced against it. We just had a new set. If people are playing new heroes, they probably haven't explored this matchup in particular, favoring more meta-prevalent heroes, so that's something you can consider. But then it's also very adaptable. Depending on your meta, you can change around the specific like silver bullet cards for different matchups. You could build it a little more defensive with more D-reacts. You could go ultra disruptive like I'm doing. You can add a little more consistency. There's just a lot of ways you can build Marionette, and it's usually very powerful as long as your build is kind of logical and makes sense. So I think it's very much worth investing your time into. So I hope this helped. Just wanted to give you, again, a brief intro into my take on Marionette. If you want the extensive version of this, in-depth breakdown, you can check out the Metafy guide in the description of this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'll take a look. And now let's get into a game that hopefully highlights these game plans and concepts that we've been discussing. All right, so here we're playing against like Kayo. We have to choose to go to second. Notably, Kayo's gotten a bunch of new cards very recently. My build was made before this happened. I don't really think I would change much, but we'll get to kind of see how this list does into an updated Kayo. So we got our best turn 0 play when our opponent goes first in the Reaper's Call. We're also pretty fortunate here to have a Sink Blow, so we only have to draw or block 2 cards rather on this Stampede, which will probably deal damage to us. Let's get rid of just a Nick. I'm actually going to hold the blue, I think. It's nice to guarantee a blue on your first hand before your Chalicer is equipped, so you can guarantee you can swing daggers if you need to. Oh, it's also nice we get to see what we're drawing into. So what do they have on top? Oh, another Stampede. Okay, nice. I don't actually want this Codex like at all, right? No. So what's the ordering here? Oh, the defend happens first, right? That's kind of sick. So we can see what's there. That's quite nice, actually. So we'll keep that on top. This is like a better blue for us to draw. Wait. Oh, did I miss the sync effect? That's awkward. That's fine. I would have bought him the prog in this situation, but we'll play on. Let's mark him. Okay, so this actually worked out pretty well. Swinging dagger here just to free up the dagger zone. always nice when you can open the game with Obriva Spinneret. It frees up your Mask of Deceit for something like Black Widow or Redback to smooth out a turn. So here I'm going to opt for Prognosis. One, I want to be presenting Disruption. It's kind of the whole point of the build. And two, I'm fairly confident this will hit because of the Shred. And we can just follow up with the Chillisra after. Oh, but most importantly here, I want the +3 applied to this attack and not the other. We get a Vigor. Yeah, these Vigor cards are really good in UKO. Yep, quite strong. We'll go for the Shred. We actually just get to destroy their Sash, which is kind of backbreaking for them, I think. They probably should be like blocking with the Scabs until now they have one card up. They would have been intending to use it this turn, which I think is fair. So we hit a blue. We see that they have a Send Packing. We have no card set. This doesn't really matter. I don't know, shot's just like a bit better. And what was off the top? Right, Smashing Ground, we knew that. Yeah, so when Proc's hitting, it's actually a good card. You saw there, it dealt a couple points of damage, it healed 2 life. It becomes like a red rate card when you're getting that life gain attached to it, which is super nice. Here it's doing a 2-card 6. This is great. This is exactly what we want to see. Our hand is not great. It's nearly very good. So this is one of the cases for where you do want blues to enable your Saber Bloodshed turns. I think I'm actually just gonna block 6 here. We don't really have a good play to make. Play the pain in the backside. And move on. There's some merit to keeping the Shred for the pain in the backside. Kayo tends to want to block like a card or 2 on their turns. But nothing wrong with this. We basically just match their rate there and kind of same thing here. It's pretty terrifying if they're not blocking this. It's not very typical. Basically implies they have like a Wild Ride or a Buck Wild or something to enable a 3-wide turn. Hopefully it's not like a Bloodrush Bellow on top of a Wild Ride. I'd have to assume it is. Yeah, they discard the Pulping there. They're probably hoping to keep that. Hopefully that was their only go again effect and they're like forced into a Scab roll here. See what happens though. Oh, they did the Buck Wild too. Okay. Yeah, it looks like they had some redundancy where they just kind of hit a lucky draw there. Either way, this is a strong turn from the opponent. I'm just checking my mental targets right now. Opponent's marked. I mean, I think I just want to, we're just not going to block anything. We'll wait and see if the last attack is disruptive. If it's not, we'll transform into Black Widow and do the Black Widow Kiss of Death thing. I do think it's important that we wait to see if they have a follow-up here. It's almost guaranteed, like, if they couldn't afford it, they would have just played that from hand to start. Yep, so they get a nice 3-wide Bloodrush turn here. It's pretty much the best thing that Kayo can be doing. Luckily we have a good answer, but they're definitely a bit ahead at the moment. Our hand's a bit modular, which is nice. Flashback's obviously very good. I would expect it to get in the mix here. But we have redundancy because the agent ability allows us to convert any of these cards into the attack reaction we need. We also have Tunic up. If our follow-up attack needs to be Chillisra, we have an efficient way to do that. And that would allow us to click the Kiss of Death, of course. Yep, so this is fine. So this is honestly like the preferred result, and usually what happens is your opponent will block most of their cards. So here I'm just pretty much never using my Snapdragon Scalers. I'm hoping I can keep this Take of the Mantle and just activate Black Widow and have that be my turn. Yeah, that's unlucky. Oh, they're also blocking 10. Okay, so we can't even... I see. So we have to flick if we want the effect. So here I'm just gonna snap, so I can threaten the Chelicera pump. And this should like effectively force them, like they have to block this. They're gonna lose the card either way. Hopefully it's a no block. Yep, so I think I'd rather get in for 3 than Mark in this case. It's kind of close because we're setting the mantle, but we'll have space to like find a good hand. Oh, I also entirely forgot that we would draw a card when our dagger hits. That's quite good. This card in particular is like whatever, but we have Kiss of Death waiting to be flicked, so we should just do this, and then we'll mark them. And we'll be in a pretty good spot here to... Oops. Clicked the wrong thing. Yeah, basically we've achieved like the big mid-game disruption pivot. We're basically tied on life. They have a bit more equipment. We're setting a mantle. They have no cards. We have a 5-card hand. This is exactly where we want to be. If they didn't have like a great turn like that Blood Rush the turn before, we would just be like light years ahead here, obviously. Now this is an interesting spot. Here I'm just kind of deciding how much risk I want to take. I'm checking how many retrieve cards I've seen. I've only seen 1. So I'm pretty open actually to having to potentially flick my clave. I'm going to convert these cards. Yep, Jill is usually not blocked. No issues with that. Luckily, Kayo is one of the decks where it's like pretty costly for them to include reactions or damage prevention cards. So I think you're actually quite favored despite all the new power they got. Because they don't really like disrupt your game plan at all. So getting the mark here is excellent. We'll play this Black Widow. I'm almost certainly going to swap in a Kiss of Death so we can get the full Tarantula Toxin value. I don't think having them on a 2-card hand versus 3-card hand is a huge deal. It's very relevant if they have a Blood Rush Bellows. But otherwise, I don't think it's a big deal. I think with where we're at in this game, I just want to deal maximum damage here and get 6 value on the Tarantula Toxin. And we're getting set a D-React. Ideally, this would be like a Codex, obviously, but we've seen that they're playing Pulping, so at some point we might get to stuff that. Even if we just get to mark them here, that'd be super nice. Okay, so here's just a 3-card Stampede for 7. Taking a look. I don't see any reason to block this. We'll just take it. And this is like, this hand is the perfect example of like why it's so huge that we can reasonably expect no prevention effects in KO. I do think there's room to play like maybe 2 copies of like a Shelter, but I think Assassin's pretty pushed out of the meta. So at your ProQuest, I would absolutely not expect that to occur. So I can safely keep this hand and say, if you don't block my pain, great. If you do, I know my flick's gonna land, so I can play the stains on my Kiss of Death and then attack for 4 after. Obviously they don't have an arsenal, but at these health totals, the damage is the important part. Makes sense. Oh, Vigor's great for them. This is the expected outcome. It'd be kind of strange for them to not be blocking Pain in the backside when they're at 10. But again, this is great for us. Like, they've given up 1 card. Now we're presenting Kiss of Death. Like, if they don't want to take this damage, they're going down to 2 cards. We're definitely going to flick to Can't go again. This is just so we can convert our cards. Alternatively, like we could have just blocked 7 on the Stampede last turn. But like here we're pushing 5 damage through, right? They're at 5. Go to 4 rather. Yeah, this is great. Presenting lethal. I'm sure they'll block with the gloves. I mean, 2 is quite good. It means the Kiss of Death that we can flick is now lethal. Not the easiest to do in this deck. We're definitely not. We're not Slippy. We have to work for the go again on it, but we can just play defensive now and like twice as we find daggers. Show strength. So funny enough, we get to reduce the attack value there. Kind is quite bad. Our opponent is at 2. So what we can always do with this hand is go 3 plus 3, go again, 6. We can do 4 card 12. There you're at 2 with 1 armor, so they're effectively at 3. They're really at 2 though, because if they go to 1, they die. So we present 12, they have to block their hand. Yeah, I am inclined to just block with the D-React, actually. And then we'll keep up Tunic, which will be nice for our follow-up, allowing us to convert any dagger pumps into a Chalice Swing effectively for free, or alternatively, if we draw Retrieve, we have the Tunic to pay for it. And statistically, we probably should draw Retrieve here. Retrieve, there's 2 toxins, we love either of those. Kiss of Death is nice just to try and flick. I guess there's consideration, we could like blocked out and like sat on the stains, but we only have 1 kiss left. I don't think that's reasonable. Really just looking for like, well, this should just mean the game's over. If that's how they're blocking that one. They should always be giving armor there, I think. If you're gonna block 5, you might as well block 6 if you're playing around the pump. And there you go. Yeah, I think that game was actually like really good example of showcasing that mid-game pivot. Like, it's exactly what you want to be doing. Kiss of Death is like the high roll version of it, where you're basically guaranteed to stop the turn. Yeah, like we took a, what was it, 20-something damage Blood Rush turn. Didn't really matter because we're able to answer back with less damage, but take all of their cards and then kind of present this consistent disruption or damage threat from there. So yeah, thanks for checking out the video. Let me know what you think.